Welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast, where we help you manage workplace safety one episode at a time. And now, your very own Safety Pro, Blaine J. Hoffman.
Okay, welcome back. Fourth and final episode in the series covering VPP. Thought I was going to say fourth and final episode of the Safety Pro Podcast. Well, it's not the fourth episode, and it's certainly not the final one, but it is the fourth and final covering the VPP. Now, I'll probably cover VPP in general in the future, but I had these four podcast episodes laid out because I wanted to tackle each of the four elements of VPP in separate podcast episodes. And like the other three, I have to mention the VPP Simplified Gap Tool. Link is in the show notes. Go to consulthoffman.com, 2 F's and 2 N's on Hoffman, and look at it there. The Gap Tool, I've used it for years, used it with many clients. Many non-VPP clients are still using it to improve their safety management systems. This tool breaks down all the four elements of VPP, breaks them down into their sub-elements, guidance notes for every sub-element, examples of what what OSHA, the on-site team, would be looking for in each of the sub-elements. You get a stoplight to indicate your current state for that sub-element, where you're at. And you even have a review source to check off to see if you've got a document review to indicate you're complying with that, meeting that sub-element, that you've done employee interviews or you've done observations in the workplace. So you can not check or check those that are appropriate. And then you have a notes section where as you progress and, get these things to the green state, right, that you've got them in control and they're sustainable, you can put the notes in there of how you're meeting or exceeding that sub-element. That can then be the basis for your VPP application language. So you're building your application as you go. You've got a great interactive visual multiple graphs that you can use for leadership in progress reports to help show, where you're at and how much you've moved or progressed in the last 2 weeks, month, quarter, or whatever. But basically, this tool is really going to help you simplify the process of how do we look at VPP or something like VPP and really do a deep dive on our safety and health management system, and how do we manage that process. That's why it's called VPP Simplified. I recommend it. I've used it for years, but as always, I'm going to stick to my core and tell you that even if you don't get that tool, I don't care. I'm going to break down the fourth element and the sub-elements, which aren't too many, but I'm going to break it down for you here in this podcast so you can take notes, you can listen to this again, you can shoot me some emails, go back and listen to the other previous 3 episodes covering VPP, so that way you get all 4 elements of the VPP broken down, okay? So I'm going to run through these, so you got to keep up, all right? You have to conduct a training needs assessment for all personnel, including new and temporary personnel. So if you have like temp help or something like that, even contractors, managers, supervisors, non-supervisory personnel, everybody, you need to do a training needs assessment. When you say I have a safety orientation, the question I'm going to ask is, what do you cover and how do you know that's what you have to cover? You need to do a training needs assessment. So here's a pro tip for you, okay? If you've done a job safety analysis, this is going to get you're going to get the most mileage out of this approach. Do the job safety analysis of routine tasks and processes that tells you the hazards associated with doing those tasks and performing those tasks, and then you come up with ways to mitigate or control those hazard prevention and controls, right? That is what you're going to train. You're going to start your training with workers on. You're going to base it on the assessment and analysis that you've done of critical processes and routine tasks. That's going to lay the foundation for your training. So when you say, we have to train people on proper PPE use, we have to train people on lockout, tagout, confined space entry, and I say, how do you know? How did you know that? Because we assessed our workplace and we've determined that those are the hazards they're going to be exposed to. So there you go. In general, if employees are not knowledgeable about serious hazards at the site and their controls, then the training cannot be considered minimally effective. There you go, bottom line. Do all personnel receive training on their rights under the OSHA Act? That's going to be key. It's got to be a part of all your training, your basic orientation, right? All personnel have to receive training on how to recognize hazardous conditions. This includes safe work procedures. You have to include training on VPP fundamentals. What is VPP? What it is not. Although you may be pursuing a partnership with VPP or you may be a VPP star site already, that does not diminish their rights under the OSHA Act. That's very important to include that in your training. Do they receive training on signs and symptoms of workplace-related illnesses? Go back to HAZCOM 101. Make sure that if they're working with chemicals in the workplace, they understand the signs and symptoms of exposure. So start there and then expand. Go into musculoskeletal disorders and MSDs and things like that for ergonomics. Make sure that they understand signs and symptoms of workplace-related illnesses. You have to cover training on PPE. Okay, the training, and this is what I always found was missing. The training has to include the PPE use, the proper use, its limitations. You have to cover that content, why it's required, and how it's to be maintained. And remember, PPE, for the most part, PPE also requires a demonstration by the folks wearing them that they know how to don, doff, inspect, and the like, and store it and clean it and all that good stuff. So you can't just hand people, a hard hat, safety glasses, and say, here's your safety glasses, here's your hard hat. They have to demonstrate that they know how to adjust, fit it, inspect it, clean it, put it on, and take it off, that good stuff. Cover general hazards in the workplace. These are some basic general safety training that you need to go over. Basic hazards, general hazards on the workplace. You also need to talk about the protective measures you have in place, okay? That includes machine guarding, alarms, controls, lockout, tagout. Make sure you cover training on signs, labels, when not to do things. What does the do not use tag mean? And you'd be surprised. People would say, well, I'm not supposed to use it today, or I can't use it when anybody else is around. Make sure you cover those types of tags and warning signs. Make sure that they understand their role and responsibility during emergency preparedness and response procedures, including evacuations. Make sure they understand what their job is to do and what they're not to do, okay? Like, go back in and get their jacket when the place is on fire. Managers and supervisors have to receive training on their specific safety and health leadership responsibilities and how to carry them out. So have a professional development program for managers, supervisors that talks about leadership, how to affect culture change, and all that good stuff. Make sure that managers and supervisors get training on site-specific VPP requirements, that they understand that this is why we're doing some of these things to partner with OSHA. If you assign staff any kind of safety and health responsibilities, including the safety manager, safety director, safety technicians, anybody like that, they have to receive training on how to conduct an assessment of workplace safety and health practices. You have to put them through some kind of training. They have to be trained on how to conduct a baseline IH hazard analysis unless you use outside help, unless you use a consultant to do your IH stuff. And remember, this only applies if you assign safety and health staff or others with those types of responsibilities. They also have to be trained on methods for changing workplace safety and health attitudes and practices and how to address necessary changes. So when you do your hazard or your safety survey, right? You do your culture survey. You're going to want to take the perception survey results, and you're going to rely on leadership and safety leadership to come up with a change plan based on the results. And we're going to need to receive some professional coaching or training on how to actually change safety and health attitudes and culture in the workplace. Another one, a big one here, safety and health staff and others assigned safety and health responsibilities. You've got to receive training on mishap investigations. I'm still shocked at how little training folks get on fishbone, 5Y, what if, bow tie analysis, all those technical tools. If you want a hint on where to start, go talk to your lean and quality people. They're problem solvers, so they're probably using all these tools. You can use them for safety, okay? You also have to have some basic training on trend analysis. If you're relying on your safety staff to conduct a trend analysis, they're going to need some training on how to do this. Hazard analysis of routine jobs, tasks, and processes, how to do a JSA, you got to have training on that. So support your folks. Routine self-inspections, how to do that. training on hazard elimination and control methods, the hierarchy of control, developing emergency procedures. Look, you're going to rely on supervisors, managers to do a lot of this stuff. You're going to need to send them away for some training. Now, if you're a small shop, let's say you're a machine shop, you've got somebody who wants to, take on safety. They're managing the office, they're managing payroll, maybe doing a little HR, and they're going to take safety on as well. The National Safety Council, the Principles of Occupational Safety and Health, or POSH training. That's a great, and I'm not affiliated with them. I don't get paid to endorse them. It's just, I know from the past, folks that have gone through that program, and they came out knowing how to do a JSA. They came out knowing how to do an accident investigation. They came out with a basic understanding of, the tips and tricks, do's and don'ts of putting on a safety training course, seminar, or meeting, how to set up a safety committee. So I don't know if it's 4 or 5 days now, but it's several days long. There is an investment, but I'm telling you right now, you get somebody that comes back with that binder and that CD with the handouts and the examples and samples, you've got somebody who's off to a good start, okay? So look to the National Safety Council, look to your local business association, your underwriter, insurance carrier. If you're in a state-run workers' comp like we are in Ohio, the Ohio BWC, there are free programs for BWC members in our state, but there are resources out there. So there's no reason why businesses, including small businesses, should be able to shrug their shoulders and say, hey, look, I just don't have the resources to adequately train somebody. You can divide and conquer. You can take the personnel, the staffing that you have, and you can divide up some of these activities, and you can get training on this stuff pretty easily. You just have to show that it's effective. And the proof is in the pudding. Are you doing a job safety analysis? Are you assessing workplace hazards adequately? And the protective measures you've come up with, are they adequate? Are they indeed protecting employees from the hazards? Yes or no? And can you prove that you know how to do that? Can you document that you've gone through a seminar, even an online course that shows you how to do this? That's all you need to do, is pull all that together to satisfy this requirement for safety and health training. Look, there's a reason why this is the fourth element, because we're pulling all this stuff together at the end, and this is what you're going to communicate to your employees, to everybody, routinely. And the last thing I want to add about safety and health training is, don't forget about contractors. Contractors need to understand the hazards of the site. They need to understand their roles in an emergency. They need to understand why they're hired and what they're going to be doing. They need to understand that they're commingling, that they're an employee with rights under the OSHA Act like your employees have, and they're standing out there on the shop floor right next to your employees exposed to the same hazards. They should be included in safety and health training to the extent that's practicable, okay? So keep that in mind. Look, this one is probably going to be the shortest one I've done. It is the fourth and final element of the VPP, safety and health training. It's very important. We're wrapping it all up with this fourth element here as you progress through your VPP journey or your basic safety and health management system improvement efforts. But again, all these are laid out in the VPP Simplified GAP tool. You have bar charts and graphs that show progress along the way for every sub-element. It's a really great tool for you to manage all that goes into the VPP program. If you go to the OSHA website and you go to the VPP page and you download the Cooperative State Programs Manual, the CSP manual for VPP, you're going to be overwhelmed. And it's going to explain in full government glory, in detail, all of the rationale and the requirements for every element and sub-element. And I'm telling you, I've been there, I've done it for more than a decade, all around the country, from the Department of Defense to Air Force bases to mining and metals manufacturing and small and large businesses, foundries, you name it. And this GAP tool really does work. It does what it says it does. It simplifies the 4 elements and sub-elements. Now, the work may be hard. It may still be difficult to get to the point where you would be considered application ready, but this will simplify breaking down all the elements and sub-elements and requirements in a very interactive and graphical, visual way. So be sure to check it out. The link in the show notes, or go to consulthoffman.com, 2 F's and 2 N's on Hoffman, and that'll get you there. Check it out. And if not, go back, re-listen to this included, but the last 4 episodes covering VPP, where I laid out every element and sub-element for you, just like it reads in the GAP tool. So, I didn't pull any punches. This isn't a tease to get you to buy the tool. Don't buy the tool. I don't care. I want you to get the information you need to stop listening to this episode and go out into your workplace right now and start making positive changes. So that's what's important to me. Keep the emails coming. I get emails all the time, and I try to answer every single one of them. Several of them get on the podcast. They're that good that I'm like, wow, I'm going to have to do an episode on that one. So keep them coming, and I will hopefully go through this last set of emails for this last element. We'll read the good reviews. And speaking of reviews, on iTunes, it's now Apple Podcasts actually. On Apple Podcasts, leave a ranking and review. That gives me good feedback. It helps others find the podcast. It tells me where I need to make improvements as well. But keep that information coming. Let's, keep the interaction going. I love hearing from you. And hey, stay tuned for the next episode of the Safety Pro podcast. And until then, be safe.
Thanks for listening to the Safety Pro podcast. Be sure to visit www.consulthoffman.com for articles and information about safety services. To have Blaine read your question on the show, email him at customerservice@consulthoffman.com. Be sure to have 2 F's and 2 N's on Hoffman. Until next time, be safe.